Well, that's excellent news, Starfleet. Thanks for letting me know. Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. Just found out some good news about the Wand Company and their communicator. They're actually making more of them. Apparently, this thing has been kind of a bit of a collector's item. It started to skyrocket in value, but apparently the Wand Company is now making more of them, so I feel like celebrating with a drink. Now, as you know, when it comes to Star Trek, I've already talked about how George Dickel whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, is the one that you see in the old original episodes. It's this bottle. They've modified it and stuff. And I thought, well, I wonder what George Dickel Tennessee whiskey tastes like. So I had a sample, and I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was very good. But I'm not going to have any of this to celebrate the news. I'm going to try something that was actually inspired by a post that I saw online. I'm actually going to have some Jim Beam Kentucky Straight Bourbon. Why? This has nothing to do with Star Trek. But it does. I saw a very funny posting that was a bit of a tongue twister, kind of a little thing, and I thought, that's pretty funny, and it's a good excuse to try out some bourbon, because I've never tried that before. Here's the picture. Basically, it's a funny play on words. How much Jim Beam could Jim beam if Jim could beam Jim Beam? I thought, you know what? I'm going to try out some Jim Beam here on the Enterprise, and let's see if I can continue to say that tongue twister as I sample it, shall we? So, let's crack her open here. So, yeah. You know what? Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey? So, I thought a bourbon was a different thing from a whiskey. So, why is this called both a bourbon and a whiskey? I don't know. I'm sure people who are big experts on Jim Beam will be able to tell me. I've seen this a lot kicking around the liquor stores, never really took an interest in it, but having read Could Jim Beam, how much Jim Beam could Jim beam if Jim could beam Jim Beam? See, I'm already starting to slip up. I haven't even had any yet. I just thought, yeah, that's a good excuse to try some out. So let's pour ourselves a good, healthy snifter of Jim Beam and see what it's like. Really going solid with it here. It already has quite the interesting smell. I'm going to move George Dickel. This one is also very tasty. I really like George Dickel. Geez, I'm getting them all mixed up already. I really like George Dickel. Immediately I'm getting the same whiff of very nice notes, very nice flavors coming from Jim Beam. So I'm hoping we're going to be following in George Dickel territory. There, I said it correctly. What is the history of Jim Beam? Aged in the heart of Kentucky, Jim Beam's Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey is made for those who take their bourbon seriously. Well, here aboard the Enterprise, we take everything seriously. Especially when we ask ourselves, how much Jim Beam could Jim beam if Jim could beam Jim Beam? I think that's going to get harder to say as I have a little bit more of this whiskey. So let's have a little snifter. The aroma is very similar to George Dickel, getting orange notes. With a little bit of like soda pop, fountain soda pop, kind of a little hint there. Roses? And even a bit of licorice. Yeah. I'm sure I have to give it a little time to open up, but I don't want you guys sitting there forever. So straight into it. Let's find out what it tastes like. Well, it has an impact. It sort of lets you know it's arrived. Not in a bad way. It's opening up the senses and opening up the nasal cavities. But nice. Yes, I'm liking it. A little bit of chocolate mint. Not as effervescent as the George Dickel. This one's a little more calm, a little more serene, a little more thought-provoking. I like it. I like it. Now, I think how much Jim Beam could Jim Beam if Jim could beam Jim Beam. I wonder if this is one of those very popular, very well established, and maybe kind of well engineered whiskeys, and this is not necessarily bashing bourbon or American whiskey, because as we all know, I've often thought about how Ralphie, famous YouTube whiskey reviewer, he's talked about one of my favorites, Johnnie Walker, as being very engineered, kind of the Coca-Cola of whiskey. And so the really big popular brands are kind of very, you know what you're getting involved in when you taste them. There's not a lot of surprise or things that are something that a whiskey aficionado would be looking for. This is not, it's not really surprising me or going in a place that I don't know already. It's very pleasant though. Let's have another go. Also, there's no burn. Now, I don't necessarily dislike burn. I also don't know what the heck I'm talking about because I like Johnnie Walker Red Label. What do I know? But whereas Johnnie Walker Red Label, you can feel its youth, to put it nicely, as it goes down. This doesn't have that. This is actually, you could knock back a bunch of these, not really set a lighter on fire with your breath or anything like that. That would be quite easy to have, very easy to have, actually. I would say you could actually down quite a few of those easier than the George Dickel. This reminds me a lot when I tried J.P. Wiser's, which is a Canadian whiskey. I found it to be very pleasant and super easy to drink. Almost akin, I've been joking with people, J.P. Wiser's I found is like Kool-Aid of whiskey. Like, you could down that stuff and never, ever notice that it's sneaking up on you. It's still strong, but it goes down super smooth, super easy. This stuff is a little bit rougher, a little bit, it's got more of a presence than J.P. Wiser's. Not in a bad way for J.P. Wiser's, but this stuff, Jim Beam, is, it's a little more punch, especially right off the bat there, but now that I've downed quite a lot of it, it's very easy to go. Here's a weird example. You've gotten into a swimming pool and it's a bit cold and you're initially like, ooh, this is really cold. And then later, the water's fine. You don't even notice it. You got adjusted to it. That's what this is. At first, this kind of said, hello, I'm here. It's time for some Jim Beam. And now that I've had it for a bit, I don't really notice that much complexity or, not complexity, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not finding anything here that I couldn't savor and appreciate. It's a little bit standard, custom, like Ralphie says with Johnnie Walker. It's very popular, heavily engineered to appeal to a wide variety of people, therefore not a lot of interesting, unique characteristics. Let's finish this one off. Not bad, not bad. But I'm finding as I'm drinking more of it, it's not really, it's not a disappointment. And now I'm getting more caramel and coffee notes. And those are pleasant. That's nice. But compared to some of the other stuff, even to George Dickel, this Jim Beam is, it's okay. Again, the challenge is how much Jim Beam could Jim Beam if Jim could beam Jim Beam. Got it. You're going to have a little smaller second one just to throw that challenge further there. Let's have like a half. I don't want to go crazy here. Jim Beam, Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Now, I've had a few bourbons, not a lot. What's the really popular one? Woodford Reserve. I've had that. It was very nice. I wouldn't be able to instantly tell you compared to this one if I like it more. I do think that one had more in the way of like aroma and intensity to it, but still wrapped into like a very pleasant flavor. This is, again, it's not unpleasant. I'm not saying bad stuff about Jim Beam, but I can see why some whiskeys are kind of run-of-the-mill, or bourbons, are run-of-the-mill, average stuff. People are kind of like, it's fine, sure. And this is fine, sure. Yeah, it's okay. I actually prefer the George Dickel over this. What more is there to say? Not much. I think, what's this? James B. Beam. None genuine without my signature. I guess there's a history to that. He must have had to sign his various casks or whatever he was shipping back in the day and said, you know what, if this doesn't, this time-honored family recipe since 1795. Wow, that's quite old. The world's #1 bourbon whiskey. But is it the #1 bourbon, or is it the #1 whiskey, or is this the #1 bourbon whiskey? I think that's what's happening there. We all know, by volume, Johnnie Walker Red Label is one of the top-selling whiskeys. So I don't know where Jim is coming up with this claim. However, let's have another go. Yeah. Run-of-the-mill. Pedestrian. Not bad. Not bad. I could easily down a bunch of that. I think if I saw that and the George Dickel side by side, I'd go with George, or more Scottish whiskey probably. So yeah, I will finish off this last little drop here and see if the tongue twister remains a challenge, or have I managed to successfully pull through after 1.5 or maybe 2, depending on the way this glassware is measuring. Have I managed to got myself to a point where I can't say the tongue twister? Let's go. And while I'm at it, I might as well just finish off the last little drop. Ooh, I do enjoy that tongue twister though. It's a good laugh. I remember reading it and going, it's pretty good. Like, you know, an interesting combination of pop culture, Star Trek reference, and also some booze is like, yeah, hey, I kind of like that. But anyway, let's finish off here. Okay. Woo. So, for one last attempt, with a clear thought, how much Jim Beam could Jim Beam if Jim could beam Jim Beam? Yes, I still got it. Okay. Well, I'm going to finish that off. There we go. That is a sampler of Jim Beam Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Just thought I'd throw a little Star Trek reference in there because I quite enjoyed that tongue twister when I saw it posted online. Thought you might enjoy this little experiment. And until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.